The bond was supposed to be a blessing, but for Violet it became a public execution. Standing in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the elite of the wolf world, she watched the man destiny had chosen for her take her sister's hand instead. The pain of the rejection wasn't just emotional, it was a physical blow that brought her to her knees while the crowd laughed. They thought the drama ended with her humiliation. They were wrong, because just as her heart stopped beating, the doors crashed open, and the one man even the alphas feared walked in not to reject her, but to burn the world down for her. The chandeliers of the Greystone Manor Hall didn't sparkle for wolves like Violet. They sparkled for the Lycans with pure bloodlines, thick glossy coats, and bank accounts that rivaled small nations. They sparkled for people like her sister Lydia. Violet adjusted the hem of her simple slate-grey dress. It was a hand-me-down from a cousin, 2 towns over, slightly frayed at the seams. But it was the only thing she owned that didn't smell like the pack house kitchens. Being the Omega of the Silver Creek Pack meant she was invisible until someone needed a floor scrubbed or a scapegoat for a mistake. "Stop fidgeting," Lydia hissed, pinching Violet's arm. Lydia looked like a vision of winter itself, draped in silver silk that clung to her curves, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves. "You're embarrassing me. Just stand in the back and hold my purse when the ceremony starts." "I'm sorry, Lydia," Violet whispered, her eyes fixed on the marble floor. "I'm just nervous." "Nervous?" Lydia laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "Why, it's not like the Alpha is going to choose you. Garrett has been looking at me since we were pups. Tonight, when the mating moon peaks, he's going to announce it. I'll be Luna and you. Well, you'll still be the help." Violet swallowed the lump in her throat. She didn't want him to be Luna. She just wanted to be seen. She wanted to be loved. The music swelled a heavy orchestral piece that signaled the arrival of the Alpha. The heavy oak doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. Garrett stepped out. He was undeniably handsome, tall with shoulders that strained against his tuxedo and hair the color of midnight. He was the newly appointed Alpha of Silver Creek, arrogant and powerful. As he descended the stairs, a hush fell over the 300 guests. Violet's breath hitched. At that exact moment, the scent hit her. It was overwhelming. It smelled like cedarwood rain on hot pavement and something dangerously electric. It was the scent of home. It was the scent of her mate. Her wolf, usually dormant and beaten down by years of abuse, howled inside her mind. Mate. He is mate. Violet's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't possible. Destiny couldn't be this cruel, or this kind. She looked up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Garrett paused on the bottom step. His nostrils flared. He had smelled it too. His gaze swept across the room, bypassing the visiting dignitaries, bypassing the wealthy socialites, and locking straight onto Violet, who was cowering in the shadows behind a potted fern. For 1 second, one glorious, terrifying second, Violet thought her life was about to change. He saw her. He felt the pull. The fates had paired the Alpha with the Omega. It was a fairy tale. Garrett's eyes widened, flashing gold, the sign of his wolf surfacing. He took a step toward her. Lydia noticed. She stiffened her eyes, darting between Garrett and her sister. Realization dawned on her face, followed immediately by a look of pure, venomous hatred. She stepped directly into Garrett's path, placing a manicured hand on his chest. "Alpha!" Lydia purred her voice loud enough to carry. "Everyone is waiting for you." Garrett blinked, the gold fading from his eyes, replaced by a cold, calculating steel grey. He looked at Lydia, beautiful popular, the daughter of the Beta. Then he looked at Violet, shabby thin, the girl who scrubbed the floors. He made his choice. He stepped around Lydia, but he didn't walk to Violet. He walked to the microphone at the center of the room. The silence was deafening. "Welcome, Frennan's allies," Garrett began, his voice booming. "Tonight is a night of destiny. The moon goddess grants us our perfect matches." Violet took a trembling step forward. "He's going to say it," she thought. "He's going to claim me." Garrett locked eyes with Violet. His expression wasn't one of love. It was one of disgust. "However," Garrett continued, his voice hardening, "sometimes the goddess makes a mistake. Sometimes a bloodline is too weak to support a pack." The room went deadly quiet. "I, Garrett Alpha, of the Silver Creek Pack," he announced, his voice ringing with Alpha command, "reject Violet of the Holloway family as my mate." The air left the room. Violet felt a physical snap in her chest, like a rib breaking. She gasped, doubling over, clutching her heart. The pain was blinding, a searing heat that tore through her veins. Rejection wasn't just words. For a wolf, it was a severing of the soul. "I accept your rejection," she whispered, though she doubted anyone heard her over the sudden murmurs of the crowd. "Furthermore," Garrett said, grinning as he held out a hand to Lydia, "I claim Lydia Holloway as my chosen mate and future Luna, a true queen for this pack." Lydia squealed with delight, rushing up the stairs to throw her arms around him. The crowd, sensing the power dynamic, erupted into applause. They cheered for the couple. They cheered for the cruelty. Violet fell to her knees, tears blurring her vision. She couldn't breathe. The pain was too much. She looked up, seeing her sister kissing the man who was destined to be hers. Garrett looked over Lydia's shoulder, meeting Violet's gaze with a smirk. "Get her out of here," Garrett commanded a guard. "She's ruining the mood." Two burly enforcers grabbed Violet by her arms, dragging her across the polished floor. Her heels scraped against the marble. "Please," she sobbed. "It hurts. Please." "Pathetic," one of the guests, a woman named Beatrice, sneered as Violet was dragged past. "An Omega thought she could land an Alpha delusional." They reached the main doors. The guards were about to shove her out into the snowy night when the temperature in the room plummeted. It wasn't a draft. It was a pressure drop. The windows rattled. The applause died instantly. The candles in the chandeliers flickered and went out, plunging the room into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the moonlight streaming through the high windows. The guards holding Violet froze. They didn't freeze because they wanted to. They froze because their wolves forced them into submission. A low growl vibrated through the floorboards, felt rather than heard. The heavy double doors which the guards were reaching for didn't just open. They were blown off their hinges. Splinters of wood showered the entryway. The guards dropped Violet and scrambled back, whining like frightened puppies. Violet lay on the floor, clutching her chest, looking up through her tear-filled eyes. Standing in the ruined doorway was a silhouette. A man. He was massive, standing nearly 7 feet tall, wearing a black trench coat that billowed around him like... His presence was so heavy, it felt like gravity had doubled. He didn't just smell like an alpha. He smelled like death. He smelled like ancient power. He smelled like king. Dawson Cross did not attend parties. He did not engage in pack politics. He was the Alpha King, the ruler of the rogues and the royals alike. He was a myth to most, a nightmare to others. He was the man who had wiped out the Northern Rebellion in a single night without shifting. He stood in the wreckage of the doorway, his eyes scanning the room. They weren't gold or red. They were a swirling, violet-hued black, the mark of a lichen god. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Even Garrett, up on the stage, was trembling. He had released Lydia, his face draining of color. Every wolf in the room bared their necks, an instinctual reaction to being in the presence of an apex predator. All except one. Dawson took a step forward. His boots crunched on the broken wood. He didn't look at the trembling elites. He didn't look at the arrogant alpha on the stage. He looked down at the small, broken girl in the grey dress lying at his feet. Violet looked up at him, terrified. The pain of the rejection was still throbbing in her chest, but as this stranger looked at her, the pain began to dull, replaced by a strange, soothing warmth. Dawson inhaled deeply. A shudder ran through his massive frame. "Who did this?" His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the silent hall. It sounded like grinding stones. No one answered. Dawson looked up, his gaze snapping to Garrett on the stage. The intensity of the look threw Garrett backward, causing him to stumble. "I asked," Dawson said, his voice rising to a roar that shook the glass in the windows. "Who did this to her?" Garrett tried to summon his alpha voice, but it came out as a squeak. Your Majesty. She is just an Omega, a nobody. I rejected her to choose a stronger mate. It is my right as Alpha." "You're right," Dawson repeated. He moved. He moved so fast the human eye couldn't track him. 1 second, he was at the door. The next, he was standing on the stage, his hand wrapped around Garrett's throat. He lifted the Alpha off the ground, as if he were a rag doll. Lydia screamed and scrambled backward, falling over her expensive dress. "You rejected her?" Dawson asked, tilting his head. He tightened his grip. Garrett clawed at Dawson's hand, gasping for air, his legs kicking uselessly. "You felt the bond of the fates, a gift given once in a lifetime, and you threw it away for status." Dawson glanced at Lydia, who was cowering on the floor. "For plastic and paint." He threw Garrett across the stage. The Alpha crashed into the band's drum set with a deafening clamor. Dawson turned his back on the Alpha. He walked down the stairs, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He knelt beside Violet. Up close, he was terrifyingly beautiful. A sharp jawline, a scar running through his left eyebrow, and those endless dark eyes. He reached out a hand. His fingers were tattooed with ancient runes. Violet flinched, expecting a blow. Dawson paused. A look of profound sorrow crossed his face. "Do not fear me, little one. I would tear my own heart out before I hurt you." He gently touched her chin, tilting her face up. "The pain in your chest, the rejection. It is fading, isn't it?" Violet nodded slowly. "Yes." How do you know?" "Because," Dawson said, his voice rough with emotion. "When an Alpha rejects his true mate, the bond snaps. But when a king finds his queen, the universe rewrites itself." Gasps echoed through the room. "Queen," Lydia whispered from the stage, her face pale. "But she's the runt." Dawson ignored her. He slipped his arms under Violet, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. He held her high against his chest, turning to face the room. "Garrett of Silver Creek," Dawson announced. "You rejected her. You broke the bond. She is no longer yours. She is no longer subject to your pack laws. She is no longer an Omega." Dawson's eyes flared, and a wave of power knocked several guests to their knees. "I am Dawson Cross, and I claim Violet Holloway not as a mate of convenience, but as my true mate, my life, and the High Queen of the Lycan Council." He looked down at Violet, who was clinging to his lapels, stunned into silence. "You are safe now," he murmured into her hair. "Wait." Garrett staggered up from the wreckage of the drums. His pride was wounded, and his greed was kicking in. He realized what he had just lost. If Violet was the queen, and he was her original mate, he could use that. "You can't take her. She is a member of my pack. I forbid it." Dawson stopped. He didn't turn around. "Did the worm speak?" Dawson asked the room. Garrett growled his wolf, trying to assert dominance. "She is property of Silver Creek. If you want her, you have to buy her contract or fight for her." It was the stupidest thing anyone had ever said in the history of the pack. Dawson turned slowly. He was smiling. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile a predator gives before it eats. "Fight for her?" Dawson chuckled. "Very well." He looked at the trembling crowd. "This pack has insulted its queen. It has abused her, and its alpha has tried to barter her like cattle." Dawson looked at the head of his security, a man named Baxter, who had just entered through the broken doors. "Baxter," Dawson said calmly, "burn this building to the ground." "With pleasure, sire," Baxter replied, pulling a flare from his jacket. Pandemonium erupted. Guests screamed and scrambled for the exits. "No, wait!" Garrett screamed, holding up his hands. "Take her! Just take her!" Dawson looked at Violet. "Do you want to see him suffer, little one? Say the word. I will peel the skin from his bones, right here." Violet looked at Garrett, the man she had loved from afar for years, the man who had looked at her with disgust. Then she looked at Lydia, who was crying her makeup running, looking small and pathetic. Violet was tired. She was hurt. She just wanted to leave. "No," Violet whispered. "I just want to go." Dawson nodded. "Your wish is my command." He turned and walked out into the snowy night, carrying her. As they stepped onto the driveway, where a convoy of black SUVs waited, Violet looked back. Inside the ballroom, Garrett was standing amidst the ruins of his party, humiliated with Lydia screaming at him. He had chosen the perfect mate and lost the most powerful connection in the world. Dawson settled Violet into the back seat of the lead SUV. The leather was warm. He climbed in beside her, pulling a thick fur blanket over her shivering shoulders. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Home," Dawson said, taking her cold hand in his massive warm one. "To the Onyx Citadel." Violet's eyes widened. The Onyx Citadel was a fortress in the mountains, a place no outsider had ever seen. "Why me?" she asked, a tear finally escaping. "I'm nobody." Dawson brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "You are everything, Violet. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to show you exactly who you really are. That Alpha didn't reject you because you were weak. He rejected you because his wolf knew he wasn't strong enough to handle what you are becoming." As the convoy sped away into the night, leaving the Silver Creek pack behind, Violet didn't know that the drama was far from over. Garrett wouldn't let his ego go that easily. And Lydia? Lydia was already plotting how to get back what she believed was hers. But for now, under the gaze of the Alpha King, Violet felt the first spark of something she had never felt before. Power. The drive to the Onyx Citadel took 4 hours. For the first hour, Violet sat rigid, afraid to touch the luxurious leather, afraid to look at the man sitting beside her. But exhaustion eventually won. She fell asleep against the cool window. When she woke, she wasn't in the car. She was being carried. Again. She blinked her eyes open. They were walking through a hall that made the Greystone Manor look like a dollhouse. The ceilings were vaulted stone hung with iron chandeliers holding real fire. The floors were black obsidian. "You're awake," Dawson said. He wasn't out of breath despite carrying her up what seemed to be 1,000 stairs. "Put me down, please," Violet said, struggling slightly. "I can walk. I'm used to working on my feet." Dawson stopped. He set her down gently but kept a steadying hand on her waist. "You will not work here, Violet. Not ever again." "I have to earn my keep," she argued instinctively. It was what her stepmother had drilled into her. "I can cook. I can clean the barracks." Dawson's face darkened. He grabbed her shoulders, gentle but firm. "Look at me." She looked up into those swirling dark eyes. "You are my mate. You are the queen. If you want to cook because it brings you joy, you may. But you will never scrub a floor again. Do you understand?" Violet didn't know how to process that. She nodded mutely. "Good." He led her to a set of double doors carved from dark mahogany. He pushed them open to reveal a bedroom larger than the entire servants' quarters she had grown up in. There was a fireplace, roaring a bed, covered in white furs, and a balcony overlooking a snowy mountain range. "Rest," Dawson commanded. "There are clothes in the wardrobe. Tomorrow the pack doctors will examine you to heal the malnutrition and the scars." He turned to leave. "Wait," Violet called out. Dawson paused his hand on the doorknob. "Why did you call me queen?" she asked. "I know you're the king, so your mate is the queen, but you said Garrett rejected me because he couldn't handle what I'm becoming. What does that mean?" Dawson turned back. His expression was unreadable, a mix of pride and caution. "The Silver Creek pack is ignorant," Dawson said. "They value blonde hair and blue eyes. They value social standing. They forgot the old ways. They forgot to look at the aura." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "When I walked into that room, Violet, I didn't just smell my mate. I smelled your bloodline." "My bloodline?" Violet frowned. "My parents were nobodies, low-ranking deltas who died in a rogue attack." "That is the lie you were told to keep you hidden," Dawson revealed. "Your father was not a delta. He was General Kalen of the Shadow Legion. And your mother, she was a seer." Violet gasped. Seers were extinct, or so everyone thought. "Lydia is not your sister." Dawson dropped the bomb casually. "Your parents hid you with the Holloways before they were killed. They paid them to keep you safe. Instead, the Holloways enslaved you and raised their own daughter, Lydia, to think she was the prize." Violet's knees buckled. Dawson caught her instantly. "My whole life," she stammered. "My whole life was a lie." "Yes," Dawson said fiercely. "Garrett's wolf sensed the seer blood in you. It scared him. He chose the safe option, the human option. But I am not afraid of power, Violet. I crave it." He brushed a stray hair from her forehead. "Rest now. You will need your strength. Tomorrow I present you to my council, and word has already spread. Garrett is demanding a parley, a formal meeting to dispute my claim." Violet felt a spike of fear. "He wants me back." "No." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "He wants to kill you, because now he knows that if you live and if you mate with me, we will be unstoppable, and he knows that you know the secrets of his pack." Dawson smiled that dangerous smile again. Let him come. I haven't had a good hunt in years. The morning sun hit the peaks of the Obsidian Mountains, casting long, sharp shadows over the citadel. Inside, Violet woke up in a bed that felt like a cloud. For a moment, she panicked, her muscles tensing as she waited for the screaming voice of her stepmother, Martha Holloway, ordering her to start the breakfast fires. But there was silence. Only the crackle of the fireplace and the scent of pine and rain, Dawson's scent clinging to the pillows. The door opened, and a woman entered. She wasn't a servant. She carried herself with the grace of a warrior. She had short cropped hair and a kind smile. "Good morning, Luna," the woman said, setting a tray of fruit and pastries on the bedside table. "I am Lena. The king asked me to assist you. He is currently in a war room meeting, dealing with the fallout of your arrival." Violet sat up, pulling the silk sheets to her chin. "The fallout? Is he in trouble?" Lena laughed, a rich, throaty sound. "King Dawson is the trouble. But yes, bringing you here has ruffled feathers. The Council of Elders is waiting to meet you. They aren't convinced that that someone from Silver Creek is fit to sit on the Onyx throne." Violet's heart sank. "They think I'm just a servant." "They think you're a spy," Lena corrected gently. "But don't worry, I've brought you something to wear. If you're going to walk into the lion's den, you should look like a lioness." An hour later, Violet stood before a full-length mirror. She barely recognized herself. The grime and grease of the Silver Creek kitchens were scrubbed away. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy knot, was washed and dried into cascading waves of chestnut brown. She wore a dress of deep velvet, the color of midnight blue, with long sleeves and a high neck that made her look regal. It hid her scars, but it highlighted the violet hue of her eyes. "Ready?" Lena asked. "No," Violet whispered. "But I don't have a choice." They walked through the corridors of the citadel. Every guard they passed, hulking men with lethal eyes, bowed their heads low. To me, Violet thought, they are bowing to me. They reached the heavy double doors of the council chamber. Inside, 12 men and women sat around a massive circular table carved from stone. At the head sat Dawson. He looked tired, his tie loosened, but when he saw Violet, his face lit up. "Violet," he said, standing immediately. The other council members remained seated, a blatant sign of disrespect. "So this is the girl," a rasping voice spoke up. It belonged to Lord Harlan, an ancient wolf with skin like parchment and eyes like flint. Pretty, but frail. You risked war with the Southern Pax for a floor scrubber, Dawson. Dawson growled a low rumble that vibrated the table. "Watch your tongue, Harlan. She is my mate." "She is an unmatched wolf," Harlan countered, slamming his hand on the table. "Garrett rejected her. By law, she is a rogue. And you brought a rogue into our inner sanctum." Violet felt the familiar shame burning her cheeks. She wanted to shrink away. But then she remembered what Dawson had told her in the car. General Kalen's daughter. A seer. She looked at Harlan, and suddenly the room tilted. The world went grey. The sound of the argument faded into a dull roar. Violet's vision tunneled. She wasn't seeing Harlan sitting at the table anymore. She saw Harlan standing on a balcony, handing a scroll to a man in a red cloak. She saw money changing hands. She saw a dagger with a serpent crest. She blinked, and the vision vanished. She gasped, stumbling forward. Dawson was at her side, instantly steadying her. "What is it?" he demanded, looking at her pale face. Are you in pain? Violet looked at Harlan. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. He's lying, Violet said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Harlan sneered. Excuse me? You aren't worried about me being a rogue, Violet said, stepping away from Dawson and walking toward the old wolf. You're worried because I'm from Silver Creek, and you've been taking bribes from Silver Creek's beta for 3 years to ignore their illegal territory expansions. The room went dead silent. Harlan's face turned purple. How dare you? I am a lord of the High Council. This is slander. Is it? Violet asked. She felt a strange buzzing in her fingertips. Check his left pocket, the inside jacket pocket. There is a receipt from a bank in the Caymans. It was deposited yesterday. Dawson looked at Harlan. Empty your pockets, Harlan. I will not, Harlan sputtered. This is a witch hunt. Dawson didn't ask again. He nodded to the guards. 2 enforcers grabbed the old man. One reached into his jacket and pulled out a slip of paper. He handed it to Dawson. Dawson read it. His expression turned terrifyingly blank. A deposit of 2 million, Dawson read, from the account of Beta Holloway, Lydia's father. The council members gasped. Dawson looked at Violet with awe. How did you know that? I saw it, Violet stammered, the adrenaline fading, leaving her shaking. I just looked at him, and I saw it happen. Lord Harlan was dragged away, screaming curses. The remaining council members stood up one by one. They looked at Violet not with contempt, but with fear and reverence. A seer, a woman whispered. The legends are true. Dawson walked over to Violet and took her hands. You just cleansed my council of a traitor we've been hunting for months. In 5 minutes. He kissed her forehead right in front of them all. The parley is set for noon tomorrow. Dawson told the room, his voice hard. Garrett is coming here to demand her back. He thinks he's coming to collect a runaway slave. Dawson turned to Violet, his eyes burning with pride. Let him come. He has no idea what he is walking into. The parley was held in the courtyard of Kings, a vast stone expanse at the base of the citadel gates. It was neutral ground technically, though the hundreds of lichen archers on the castle walls made it clear whose territory this was. Violet stood next to Dawson. She wore a heavy cloak lined with white fur to block the biting wind. Her heart was hammering, but Dawson's hand on the small of her back kept her grounded. At exactly noon, the convoy arrived. 6 luxury SUVs rolled into the courtyard. The doors opened and the Silver Creek delegation stepped out. Garrett looked worse than he had at the ball. His eyes were bloodshot, and he walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from Dawson's throw. Lydia was beside him, dressed in black, wearing a veil, as if she were mourning. Behind them was Beta Holloway, Lydia's father looking nervous, and behind them, Violet stopped breathing. Stepping out of the last car was a woman with a pinched face and cruel, beady eyes. Martha Holloway, the woman who had raised Violet, the woman who had beaten her when the floors weren't clean enough. Dawson, Garrett called out, stopping 10 yards away. You are harboring a fugitive of the Silver Creek pack. I am harboring my queen, Dawson replied calmly. His voice didn't need to be loud to command authority. Speak your piece, pup, and then leave my land before I decide to expand my garden using your bones as fertilizer. Garrett bristled, but held his ground. You claim she is your mate, but she is a criminal. Lydia stepped forward, throwing back her veil. Her eyes were red, but Violet could see the malice shining underneath. Oh, Violet, Lydia sobbed theatrically. How could you, after everything we did for you?" "What is she talking about?" Dawson asked Violet quietly. I don't know," Violet whispered. "Violet Holloway is wanted for the murder of her parents," Garrett announced, holding up a file. The breath left Violet's lungs. "Whatham, we found the evidence," Garrett shouted, playing to the audience of guards and council members watching from the balconies. "She poisoned the Deltas who raised her so she could steal their savings. She's been planning to run away for years. She's a psychopath." "That's a lie," Violet screamed, stepping forward. "They died in a rogue attack. You told me that I was 6 years old. We lied to protect you," Martha Holloway shrieked, stepping up. "I took you in, you ungrateful wretch. I raised you alongside my own precious Lydia, even though I knew you had bad blood. And this is how you repay me, by running off with a king and leaving us in shame." Martha pointed a shaking finger at Violet. "Tell them, Violet. Tell them how you mixed the wolfsbane in their tea." Violet grabbed her head. Memories swirled. Conflicting images. She remembered the rogue attack, didn't she? Or had she been told that story so many times? She created the memory. "She's gaslighting you." Dawson's voice pierced her panic. "Look at her, Violet. Use your gift. Look at the truth there." Violet squeezed her eyes shut, then snapped them open. She looked at Martha. The grey world returned. She saw the kitchen of her childhood home. She saw Martha standing over a stove, pouring a blue liquid into a teapot. She saw Martha smiling. She saw Martha taking a heavy bag of gold from a man in a hooded cloak, the same cloak she had seen in Harlan's memory. She saw the papers, adoption papers, and a will. "You didn't protect me," Violet said, her voice trembling, then growing stronger. The wind around her began to pick up, swirling the snow into a vortex. "You sold me," Martha faltered. I did no such thing." "You poisoned my parents," Violet accused, pointing at Martha. Her finger seemed to glow with a faint ethereal light. "General Kalen and his wife. You poisoned them because Beta Holloway paid you to do it. He wanted their land. He wanted their status for himself." Beta Holloway turned pale. "She's lying. The girl is mad. And you?" Violet turned her gaze to Garrett. "You know, you found the files in the Beta's office 3 days ago. That's why you rejected me. Not because I was weak, but because you knew if I ever found out who I was, I would have a claim to the Silver Creek Alpha line." Garrett took a step back, his arrogance cracking. "You can't prove any of that." "I don't need to prove it to a judge," Violet said. Her eyes were glowing fully white, now the iris and pupil gone. "I am a seer, and I am showing them." Violet threw her hands out. It wasn't just a vision in her head this time. A projection like a hologram, made of mist and shadow, erupted in the center of the courtyard. Everyone saw it. They saw the scene of the murder. They saw a young Beta Holloway handing the poison to Martha. They saw the transaction. They saw Garrett reading the files and burning them in his fireplace just hours before the ball. The projection faded. The silence in the courtyard was absolute. Dawson stepped forward. He pulled a massive broadsword from the sheath at his back. The metal sang as it cleared the leather. "You came here," Dawson said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "accusing my queen of murder, when in reality you are the architect of her suffering." Dawson looked at the Silver Creek guards who had come with Garrett. "Your Alpha is a fraud," Dawson addressed them. "He burned the evidence of a murder to keep his power. He knowingly harbored the killers of General Kalen, a war hero. The Silver Creek guards looked at each other. Then slowly they lowered their weapons. They stepped away from Garrett. "Traitors!" Garrett screamed. "I command you to attack." "They don't answer to you anymore," Dawson said. He raised his sword. "By the laws of the ancients, I challenge you, Garrett. Right here, right now. To the death." Garrett looked at the sword, then at Dawson's hulking size. He looked at Violet, whose eyes were still glowing. Garrett did the only thing a coward could do. He grabbed Lydia. In one swift motion, he pulled a silver knife from his boot and held it to Lydia's throat. "Let me leave," Garrett screamed, using his own mate as a human shield. "I'll kill her, I swear I'll kill her," Lydia shrieked, clawing at Garrett's arm. "Garrett, what are you doing? I'm your Luna." "Shut up," Garrett spat. "You're nothing but leverage." Martha screamed. "My baby, don't hurt my baby." Dawson paused. He couldn't risk an innocent life, even if that life was Lydia's. But Violet didn't pause. She looked at her sister. The sister who had bullied her. The sister who had stolen her life. And now the sister who was about to be sacrificed by the man she thought loved her. Violet felt pity, and then she felt rage. "Let her go." Violet didn't shout. She commanded. It wasn't an alpha command. It was something older. It was the voice of the Oracle. The sound hit Garrett like a physical blow. His hand spasmed, dropping the knife. He clutched his head, screaming, as if a high-pitched frequency was shattering his eardrums. Lydia scrambled away, crawling through the snow toward her mother. Garrett fell to his knees, nose bleeding, unable to withstand the pressure of Violet's voice. Dawson didn't waste the opening. He lunged, but before his sword could connect, a gunshot rang out. Bang! Dawson stumbled mid-stride. A bloom of red appeared on his shoulder. From the trees surrounding the courtyard, dark figures emerged. They weren't Silver Creek wolves. They were something else. They wore masks made of bone. "Hunters!" Dawson snarled, clutching his shoulder. It was a trap. Garrett hadn't just brought his pack. He had sold out the location of the Onyx Citadel to the Human Hunters, a terrorist group dedicated to wiping out Lycans. "Kill them all!" Garrett laughed maniacally, scrambling back toward the hunter line. "If I can't have the kingdom, no one can." The courtyard exploded into chaos. Bullets flew, wolves shifted, and in the center of it all, Violet stood frozen, watching the man she was falling in love with bleed into the snow. The peaceful courtyard of the Onyx Citadel had transformed into a slaughterhouse. The snow, once pristine and white, was now churned into a slush of mud and crimson. "Dawson!" Violet screamed, her voice tearing through the cacophony of gunfire and growls. Dawson had fallen to one knee, his hand clamped over his shoulder. The bullet wasn't ordinary lead. Black veins were already spreading from the wound, pulsing underneath his skin. Wolfsbane. Concentrated and lethal. "Get her inside!" Dawson roared to Baxter, his voice strained with pain. He forced himself to stand, his eyes flashing a volatile mix of violet and feral black. He didn't retreat. He shifted. With a sound like cracking thunder, the king's body contorted and expanded, clothes shredded as massive muscles tore through. In seconds, a midnight black wolf the size of a warhorse stood in the courtyard. He let out a howl that shattered the windows of the SUVs. Dawson lunged at the hunter line, a blur of shadow and teeth. He wasn't fighting like a man. He was fighting like a god of war. He tore through the armored humans, his jaws snapping bone and metal alike. But there were too many of them. The hunters tipped off, by Garrett had brought heavy artillery. Flashbangs detonated, blinding the Lycan guards. Silver nitrate nets were launched from the tree line, pinning down the Citadel's defenders. Baxter grabbed Violet's arm. "Luna, we have to go. The bunker is secure." "No." Violet yanked her arm back. "I'm not leaving him. He is the king he can handle. He's dying." Violet pointed at the great black wolf. Dawson was slowing down. The wolfsbane was working fast. He stumbled, shaking his massive head as 3 hunters aimed high-caliber rifles at his chest. Violet didn't think. She didn't calculate. She simply felt. The fear that had ruled her life, fear of her stepmother. Fear of poverty, fear of not being enough, evaporated. In its place, a cold, ancient anger woke up. "They want to kill my mate." Violet stepped forward. She didn't run. She walked. Her eyes, which had flickered white before, now ignited like twin stars. The air around her began to distort. The snow stopped falling. It hung suspended in mid-air, frozen by the sheer pressure of her aura. "Baxter," Violet said, her voice echoing, as if 3 people were speaking at once. "Tell the archers to aim for the trees. The coordinates are north-northwest, elevation 40. "But we can't see them," Baxter shouted. "I can," Violet said. She raised a hand. In her mind's eye, the grey world revealed everything. She saw the heat signatures of the snipers hiding in the pines. She saw the trajectory of every bullet before it was fired. "Fire," she commanded. The Citadel archers, trusting their new queen, loosed a volley of arrows blindly into the trees. Screams echoed from the forest as the hidden snipers fell, pierced with deadly accuracy. In the center of the courtyard, the 3 hunters aiming at Dawson were about to pull the triggers. Violet clenched her fist. "Stop!" She threw a wave of psychic force across the battlefield. It wasn't physical, it was mental. It slammed into the minds of the hunters like a sledgehammer. The 3 men dropped their rifles, clutching their heads, screaming as they were bombarded with visions of their own worst nightmares. They fell to the ground, writhing in psychological agony. Dawson, sensing the threat was gone, shook off the dizziness. He looked at Violet. Even in his wolf form, his adoration was clear. He growled a thank you and turned back to the remaining enemies, renewed by her strength. But amidst the chaos, one rat was scurrying away. Garrett. While his allies died, the cowardly alpha of Silver Creek was army crawling toward one of the SUVs, dragging a sobbing Lydia by her hair. "Start the car!" Garrett screamed at her, shoving her into the driver's seat. "Drive, or I'll rip your throat out!" Lydia fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them. "Useless cow!" Garrett struck her across the face. "Going somewhere, Garrett." The voice was soft, melodic, and terrifying. Garrett froze. He turned slowly. Violet was standing 10 feet away. She wasn't surrounded by guards. She didn't need them. Debris and loose stones were floating around her, orbiting her like satellites. "Violet," Garrett stammered, holding up his hands. "Listen to me. We can make a deal. I made a mistake. The bond, we can re-establish the bond. I'll make you Luna of Silver Creek. We can rule together." Violet tilted her head. "You tried to kill the man I love. You sold my home to terrorists, and you think I want your title. I'm an alpha." Garrett shouted, his ego trying to override his fear. "I am your natural superior." "You," Violet whispered, stepping closer, "are an insect." Garrett snarled and shifted. His wolf was brown and mangy compared to Dawson's, but it was still dangerous. He lunged at her jaws open, aiming for her neck. Violet didn't flinch. She didn't even raise a hand. She simply looked him in the eye and spoke one word in the ancient tongue. "Kneel." The command hit Garrett mid-air. It wasn't just a suggestion. It was gravity itself crushing him. His wolf slammed into the pavement, face first, pinned by an invisible force. Bones cracked. He whined, scrabbling against the stone, but he couldn't lift his head. Violet walked up to him. She looked down at the creature who had tormented her dreams for years. "I reject you," she said simply. She looked over Garrett's prone form to the car, where Lydia was cowering. "Lydia," Violet said. Lydia flinched. "Please, Violet, don't kill me. Mom made me do it. She made me hate you." "I know," Violet said. She felt no hate for Lydia anymore, only pity. "Take your mother, take your father, and run. If I ever see you in my territory again, the outcome will be different." Lydia didn't wait. She scrambled out of the car, grabbed her screaming mother who was hiding behind a tire, and they ran into the woods, vanishing into the snow. They were rogues now, without a pack, without money, without status. A fate worse than death for them. Violet looked back down at Garrett. A shadow fell over them. Dawson had returned. He had shifted back to human form, naked from the waist up, blood streaming from his shoulder. But his strength was returning. He held a sword he had taken from a fallen guard. He looked at Violet, then at the pinned wolf. "Is he yours to kill my queen?" Dawson asked breathlessly. "Or mine?" Violet looked at Garrett's terrified eyes. "He's nobody's," Violet said, turning away. "He doesn't deserve a warrior's death." Dawson nodded. He didn't offer mercy. He didn't offer a speech. He simply swung the blade. The head of the Alpha of Silver Creek rolled across the snow. The battle was over. The adrenaline crashed. Violet's knees gave out. The floating stones dropped to the ground. The white light faded from her eyes, leaving her exhausted and trembling. She felt strong arms catch her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," Dawson whispered, his voice rough with pain, but full of love. "I've got you." The recovery took 2 weeks. The wolfsbane bullet had missed Dawson's heart by an inch, but the poison had ravaged his system. For 3 days he burned with a fever that would have boiled a human alive. For 3 days, Violet did not leave his side. She sat in the grand infirmary, cooling his forehead with damp cloths, singing soft songs she remembered from a childhood before the Holloways. She used her seer abilities to guide the healers, telling them exactly where the poison was stagnating in his veins, so they could draw it out. When the fever finally broke, Dawson opened his eyes to see Violet asleep in a chair next to his bed, her hand clutching his. He squeezed her fingers. She woke instantly. "You're back," she breathed, tears welling up. "I never left," Dawson rasped. He tried to sit up, wincing. "The Citadel, the pack, safe," Violet assured him, pouring him water. "The hunters were wiped out. We found their base using the GPS from Garrett's car, and handled it. Baxter led the strike team." Dawson looked at her with a new intensity. "And the council?" Violet hesitated. They have been cooperative." "Cooperative?" Dawson laughed softly. "Lena told me everything while you were asleep. She told me you ran the war room sessions. She told me you organized the perimeter defenses. She told me you exiled the Holloway women instead of executing them, showing mercy." He pulled her hand to his lips. They aren't just cooperative, Violet. They are terrified of you, and they adore you. Violet blushed. I just did what had to be done. You did what a queen does, Dawson corrected. A month later, the Onyx Citadel was unrecognizable. The damage from the battle had been repaired. The Great Hall was draped in banners of black and gold, the colors of the Alpha King. But today there was a new color mixed in. Silver, the color of the seer. Guests had arrived from every pack on the continent. Alphas who had previously scoffed at Dawson's rule were now bowing low, bringing expensive gifts. Rumors of the sorceress queen had spread far and wide. No one wanted to be on her bad side. Violet stood in the preparation room, staring at her reflection. The dress was commissioned by Dawson himself. It was made of liquid silk that shimmered like moonlight. The bodice was encrusted with real diamonds, and the train flowed behind her for 6 feet. But it was the face in the mirror that surprised her. The scared girl from the kitchen was gone. In her place was a woman who had faced death and won. Her chin was high, her eyes clear. Are you ready? Dawson stood at the door. He wore a formal military uniform, heavy with medals, a black cape over one shoulder. He looked devastatingly handsome. I'm nervous, Violet admitted. Don't be. Dawson walked over, standing behind her, his hands on her shoulders. You are the strongest person in this castle, including me. He reached into a velvet box held by Lena. He pulled out a crown. It wasn't a delicate tiara. It was a heavy, ancient thing, made of white gold and obsidian, topped with a massive violet sapphire. This belonged to the first queen of the Lycans, Dawson said softly. It has been locked in the vault for 300 years, because no mate was deemed worthy of it. He placed it gently on Violet's head. It fit perfectly. Until now. They walked out together. The doors to the Great Hall opened. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Thousands of wolves cheered, stomping their feet, howling in approval. They walked down the aisle, hand in hand. Violet saw faces she recognized. She saw the council members bowing respectfully. She saw former members of the Silver Creek Pack looking ashamed but hopeful that their new leadership would be better than Garrett's. They reached the dais. The High Priestess of the Moon stood waiting. Do you, Dawson, cross Alpha King, accept this woman as your equal? To share your power, your blood, and your soul? I do, Dawson said, his voice ringing through the hall. And do you, Violet of the line of Kalen? The priestess turned to her. Accept this man as your mate, to guide him, to guard him, and to rule beside him. Violet looked at Dawson. She saw the monster who had saved her, the king who had bowed to her, the man who loved her. I do, she said. The priestess bound their hands with a ribbon of gold. Then I declare you mated. Long live the king. Long live the queen. Long live the queen, the crowd chanted. Dawson didn't wait for the ceremony to conclude properly. He swept Violet into his arms and kissed her a deep, passionate kiss that made the crowd go wild. Later that night, they stood on the highest balcony of the citadel, watching the northern lights dance over the mountains. What happens to them? Violet asked quietly, leaning her head on his chest. Lydia and Martha, our scouts reported seeing them in the southern wastelands, Dawson said, wrapping his cloak around her. They are working as scullery maids in a low-ranking tavern, scraping plates for copper coins. Violet closed her eyes. It was justice. Poetic, cold justice. They were living the life they had forced her to live. Forget them, Dawson whispered, turning her to face him. Look forward, Violet. What do you see? Violet looked out at the horizon. She let her vision shift just for a second. She saw the grey world, but it wasn't dark. It was bright. She saw a future where the pack was strong. She saw peace between the wolves and the humans. She saw a little boy with black hair and violet eyes running through the halls of the citadel laughing. She smiled, blinking back to the present. "I see everything," she whispered, "and it's beautiful." Dawson kissed her forehead. "As are you, my queen. As are you." The wind howled around the onyx citadel, but inside the fire was warm, and the reign of the seer queen had just begun. What an incredible journey. From the heart-breaking rejection in the ballroom to the epic battle at the citadel, Violet proved that true power doesn't come from a title, it comes from within. She didn't just get the guy. She got the crown, the justice and the revenge she deserved, all while keeping her humanity intact. Garrett and the Holloways got exactly what was coming to them, living the hard life they forced on Violet. If you enjoyed this full-length saga of Her Mate Rejected Her, please smash that like button. Let's try to hit 10,000 likes on this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I upload new dramatic stories every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one. What kind of story should I write next? A billionaire romance or another fantasy twist? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, listening, and see you in the next story.